10 countries have been named the most censored in the world. Some have jailed their journalists, others have harassed the press, and still others have denied journalists and citizens access to information and the internet. Today's World Press looks at the latest report on the state of journalists. I'm Dr. Anthony Fellow, Professor of Communications at California State University Fullerton, and this is World Press, a news and documentary show that monitors press freedom throughout the world. The Committee to Protect Journalists just released its annual list of the most censored, or we can say most repressed countries in the world. Those on the list used a variety of tactics ranging from imprisonment and repressive laws to harassment of journalists and restrictions on internet access. We'll turn to World Press correspondent Cassandra Zavala to tell us which 10 countries made this year's list.
Dr. Fellow, this year's list includes in order of the worst acts of oppression on journalists the following countries: Eritrea, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Azerbaijan, Vietnam, Iran, China, Myanmar, and Cuba. The tactics used by Eritrea and North Korea mirror to varying degree those used by officials in other heavily censored countries. To keep their grip on power, repressive regimes use a combination of media monopoly, harassments, spying, threats of journalist imprisonment, and restriction on journalist entry into a movement within their countries. Let's look at how these countries stack up on imprisonment, repression, and lack of access to the internet. Joining me in World Press correspondent is Jared Brass.
7 of the 10 most censored countries, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Azerbaijan, Vietnam, Iran, China, and Myanmar, are also among the top 10 worst jailers of journalists worldwide. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, China has the distinction of being the world's worst jailer. Most of the 44 journalists imprisoned in China are charged with speaking against the state. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, some 17 journalists have been jailed for violating the country's anti-terrorism laws. These laws criminalize any reporting that authorities deem to encourage or provide moral support to banned groups. Vietnam uses a vague law against abusing democratic freedom to jail bloggers, and Myanmar relies on its 1923 Official Secrets Act to prevent criminal reporting on its military. Limiting journalists' access to the internet is another type of punishment. In Cuba, for example, the internet is available to only a small portion of the population. China, despite having hundreds of millions of internet users, maintains the Great Firewall. That's a sophisticated blend of human sensors and technological tools to block critical websites and rein in social media. In Azerbaijan, little independent traditional media exists. Their criminal defamation laws have been extended to social media and carry a 6-month prison sentence. The world's toughest internet censorship regime can be found in Iran. Its government has blocked millions of websites. Iran also has the distinction of being the second worst jailer of journalists. Some 30 are behind bars. Harassment of the press is another tactic used to silence the press.
A number of harassment tactics also have been used to silence the press. Newspaper offices have been raided, advertisers have been threatened, and retaliatory charges such as drug possession have been levied against journalists. In Vietnam, many bloggers are put under surveillance in an attempt to prevent them from attending and reporting on the news events. In Iran, journalists' relatives have been summoned by authorities and told that they could lose their jobs and pensions because of this. And let's not forget the common tactic of restricting journalists' movements and barring foreign correspondents. In Eritrea, for example, the last remaining accredited international reporter was expelled in 2007. And the few outside reporters invited in occasionally to interview the president are closely monitored. And in China, foreign correspondents have been subjected to arbitrary delays in visa applications. We'll continue our in-depth look at some of the sinister ways being practiced to keep journalists from reporting the truth when World Press returns.
What is a hero? Are heroes born, or are they made? In after-school programs, your kids will uncover hidden strengths, discover they have the power to change their future, and find the hero inside themselves. Let us know you on after-school programs in your area. Call 1-800-USA-LEARN. After-school programs, helping kids find the hero within.
We've devoted a large part of our first segment discussing the latest reports from the Committee to Protect Journalists. Now, we'll turn our attention to those 10 countries and why the committee has named them the most repressive countries in the world as far as press freedom is concerned. We begin with Eritrea. We begin with World Press correspondent Brittany Longmire.
Eritrea has the most jailed journalists in Africa. Here, only state media are allowed to disseminate news. By the way, the last accredited international correspondent was expelled in 2007. Even those working for the heavily censored state press live in constant fear of arrest for any report perceived as critical to the ruling party. The last privately owned media outlets were suspended and their journalists were jailed in 2001. In addition, access to the internet is extremely limited here and is only available through slow dial-up connections. Less than 1% of the population goes online. By the way, we have learned that 5 independent journalists who were arrested in 2001 may have died in prison. Now we will turn to number 2 on the list of the most censored countries in the world, North Korea. Here is world correspondent Ray Furukawa.
Nearly all the content of North Korea's 12 main newspapers, 20 periodicals, and broadcasters comes from the official Korean Central News Agencies, which focuses on the political leadership statement and activities. The internet is restricted to the political elite. According to the Associated Press, North Koreans looking for independent information have turned to bootlegged foreign TV and radio signal and smuggled foreign DVDs. Although cell phones are banned, some citizens have been able in recent years to access news through smuggled phones, which rely on Chinese cell towers. Meanwhile, country number 3, Saudi Arabia, has intensified legal repression since the Arab Spring. World Press correspondent Taylor Peitzmeyer has that story.
Last year, the government issued a new anti-terrorism law and regulations that Human Rights Watch said will criminalize virtually any expression or association critical of the government and its understanding of Islam. YouTube is used by many Saudis to address controversial issues such as women driving and to document events not covered in the media, such as the stabbing of a Canadian in a Dhahran city mall in November. The government also uses a 2007 cybercrime law to censor social media. At the moment, at least 7 Saudis have been charged for violating this law. One group of Saudi journalists used Twitter to allegedly criticize the authorities by calling for women to be allowed to drive. Now we turn to number 4 on the checklist of the most censored countries, Ethiopia. Here is World Press correspondent Harmony Cairns.
As Ethiopia prepares for its May 2015 elections, the state is systematically cracking down on the country's remaining independent publications. Journalists have been arrested and printing and distribution companies have been intimidated. Filing lawsuits against editors and forcing publishers to cease production have resulted in only a handful of independent publications in a country of more than 90 million people. 10 independent journalists and bloggers were imprisoned in last year when authorities filed a lawsuit accusing 6 publications of encouraging terrorism, forcing at least 16 journalists to flee into exile. Authorities last year unleashed the largest onslaught against the press since a crackdown in 2005 after disputed parliamentary elections. 10 independent journalists and bloggers were arrested on anti-state charges, and at least 8 independent publications were shut down. Now to Azerbaijan, number 5 on the Committee to Protect Journalists' Most Censored Countries. Here is World Press correspondent Marisa Plasencia.
The main sources of information in Azerbaijani are broadcasters, which are owned and controlled by the state or its proxies. International broadcasters are barred or their satellite signals are jammed. Critical print outlets have been subjected to harassment from officials, including debilitating lawsuits, evictions, a ban on foreign funding, and advisories to business against advertising. Online speech is subject to self-censorship because of a criminal defamation law that carries a 6-month prison sentence. News and social media websites are blocked arbitrarily. At least 10 journalists and bloggers are in jail. Several journalists fled the country in 2014,
and those remaining faced attacks and harassment, were banned from their traveling, or were prosecuted on fabricated charges. Next on the list of the most oppressive countries as far as the press is concerned is Vietnam. Here's World Press correspondent Brianna Murrow.
Vietnam is one of the world's worst jailers of journalists, with at least 16 behind bars. Vietnam's Communist Party-run government allows no privately held print or broadcast outlets. As with most communist countries, all media working in Vietnam must serve as the mouthpiece of party organizations. The Central Propaganda Department holds mandatory weekly meetings with local newspaper, radio, and TV editors to hand down directives on which topics should be emphasized or censored in their news coverage of forbidden topics, such as factional divisions inside the Communist Party, human rights issues, and any mention of ethnic differences between the country's once divided northern and southern regions. Independent bloggers who report on sensitive issues have faced persecution through street-level attacks, arbitrary arrests, surveillance, and harsh prison sentences for anti-state charges. Authorities widely block access to websites critical of the government. At least 3 bloggers have been convicted under the country's law, which allows for 7-year prison sentences. Number 7 on the CPJ list is Iran. Here is World Press correspondent Mukrai Mokhtar.
The government uses detention as a means of silencing dissent and forcing journalists into exile. Iran became the world's leading jailer of journalists in 2009 and has ranked among the world's worst jailers of the press every year since. Iranian authorities maintain one of the toughest internet censorship regimes in the world, blocking millions of websites, including news and social networking sites. They are suspected of using sophisticated techniques such as setting up fake versions of popular websites and search engines, and the regime frequently jams satellite signals. China is number 8 on the list. Paria Azgui is covering that country.
Decade China has been among the top 3 jailers of journalists in the world, a distinction that is unlikely to lose anytime soon. Document 9, a secret white paper dated April 22, 2014, which was widely linked online and to the international press, included the directive to combat 7 political perils and reject the concept of universal values and the promotion of the West's views of media. It is clear to journalists that the role of the media is to support the party's unilateral rule. The paper reasserted the necessity for China's technological and human censors to be even more vigilant when keeping watch over the country's 642 million internet users. That is about 22% of the world's online population. Myanmar comes in at number 9 of the 10 most censored nations in the world. Here's World Press correspondent Mukri Mokhtar.
Despite an end to more than 4 decades of pre-publication censorship, Myanmar's media remain tightly controlled. The Printers and Publishers Registration Law enacted last year bans news that could be considered insulting to religion, disturbing to the rule of law, or harmful to ethnic unity. Publications must be registered under the law, and those found in violation of its vague provisions risk deregistration. National security-related laws, including the colonial-era 1923 Official Secrets Act, are used to threaten and imprison journalists who report on sensitive military matters. For example, 5 journalists with the independent weekly newspaper, Unity, were sentenced to 10 years in prison with hard labor, reduced on appeal to 7 years for reporting on the secretive military. 3 journalists and 2 publishers of an independent newspaper were sentenced to 2 years in prison on charges of defaming the state. Their offense? Publishing a false statement made by a political activist group. Finally, number 10 on the CPJ list is Cuba, and here is World Press correspondent Justin Sahagian.
Cuba continues to have the most restricted climate for press freedom in the Americas. The print and broadcast media are wholly controlled by the one-party communist state, which has been in power for more than half a century, and by law, must be in accordance with the goals of the socialist society. Although the internet has opened up some space for critical reportings, service providers are ordered to block objectionable content. Independent journalists and bloggers who work online use websites that are hosted overseas and must go to foreign embassies and hotels to upload content and get an unfiltered connection to the internet. These critical blogs and online news platforms are largely inaccessible to the average Cuban, who still have not benefited from a high-speed internet connection financed by Venezuela. Most Cubans do not have internet at home. The government continues to target critical journalists through the harassment, surveillance, and short-term detentions.
Justin, as you know, Juliet Michelina Diaz, a contributor to a network of local citizen journalists in Cuba, was imprisoned for 7 months on anti-state charges. She photographed an incident between residents and police in Havana. She was later declared innocent and freed. So now you know the 10 countries that have made the illustrious list of the most censored countries in the world. Our World Press Roundtable is next. We will look at the use of social media in fomenting revolution when we return.
Hey.
Ready to go?
Yeah, but the fire's not out.
Close enough.
Close enough? If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. I mean, the next thing you know, you've torched our whole neighborhood.
Which is why we're not going anywhere?
Exactly. 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
In most of the 10 most censored countries, for journalists, efforts at blogging and social media are severely restricted. We now turn our attention to the use of social media in fomenting revolution. Dr. Jim Willis, professor of communications at Azusa Pacific University and a foreign correspondent as well as a State Department lecturer, talked about the impact of social media and why the government fears their use. We're joined today by Dr. Jim Willis, veteran news reporter and editor and former chair of the departments at Boston College, Ball State University, and Azusa Pacific University, where he is currently a professor of communications. He's written 11 books on media and is a frequent lecturer for the United States State Department. And welcome to our show today, Jim. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
And you know, it's been a dangerous year. The Committee to Protect Journalists has released its 2015 list of the most dangerous countries for journalists, and we've seen beheadings around the world. How dangerous is it for journalists today?
I think it's a pretty scary place. I think especially in a day when there are more freelancers out there reporting because the traditional news bureaus have cut back. And the advantage of freelancers is that they can sort of maneuver and they're a little more nimble in terms of where they can go, but the problem for them is that they are out there pretty much by themselves. And so they're more vulnerable to some of the risks and some of the safety issues that safety concerns that are out there. I think especially for those journalists who are in-country journalists who are natives of those countries who are reporting on their own countries for the world media, it's a real scary place for them.
Before foreign correspondents used to go to a country, they were safe. They weren't really in a line of fire. It was challenging, but today journalists seem to be on the forefront of attacks by political groups and other entities like ISIS.
Right.
And why do you think that is?
I think journalists are on the forefront because they're high profile. American journalists are especially high profile. Bob Woodruff of ABC, when he went to cover the war in Iraq several years ago and was almost killed for it, there was a lot of attention paid by ABC to Woodruff and to his experience, and he was given a platform then which he used to create an entire series on brain injuries that troops were vulnerable to over there. There's a film called Under Fire where there's an American journalist who was killed, and a lot of attention now is after that is paid to this situation in Nicaragua, whereupon a Nicaraguan woman steps forward and tells one of the remaining American journalists, we should have killed an American journalist 50 years ago to get more attention down here. And I think that kind of high profile makes journalists more of a target for those who would wish the West harm.
Yes, I think you're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some other things since I have you here. We're both working on a book together on tweeting for freedom,
yes,
and about the role of social media today around the world in bringing about revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your take on social media today and changing the political atmosphere of some countries?
Yeah, I don't think you could understate it, the role of social media. I just returned from Russia and was pleasantly surprised to discover that the filters that I thought would be in place there on the social media and on the internet in general really were not in place, where they were not existent. And so Russians are able to access anything in the world, and on social media, Twitter, whatever, that we are over here. And that gives me hope for countries that are dominated by one particular political party or one particular politician, government official. And I think we began seeing, largely because of the Arab Spring in Egypt, the role that the social media can play in helping to galvanize supporters who may be in opposition to the ruling government, to let others know that they're not alone in that fight, and to give them an informal but a very effective channel of communicating with each other. We also know that the social media is abused as well. That's one of the recruiting tools that ISIS uses to spread its propaganda and to try to do its recruiting. But I'll never forget one particular image that comes to mind when I was covering the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall in 2009. And part of the Festival of Freedom that was created in Berlin by Germany to commemorate the fall of the wall 20 years later, they established what they called a Twitter wall, Berlin Twitter wall, which is still up on the web, berlintwitterwall.com. And on that wall, people from around the world were invited to tweet out messages of other walls of oppression that still need to fall. And within a matter of seconds, when that site went up, these various tweets started coming from around the world about different problems that people were having in their own countries. And many of the initial tweets came out of China until the Chinese government put on a block on that site and prevented its people from doing it. But as you watch that, as you dial that site up and watch it, and hit the play button, these messages just start scrolling by in every language conceivable, celebrating freedom and talking about areas of their countries that need to be opened up more and problems that they're having. So I think social media is a terrific tool.
Jim, thank you for being here today. Very enlightening. And in 2016, Tweeting for Freedom, look out for that book. It'll be very interesting. I've been talking to Dr. Jim Willis, who is professor of communications at Azusa Pacific University, a very distinguished journalist, a very distinguished author. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Willis makes some good points about the role of social media in fomenting revolution, and that's the topic of this week's World Press Roundtable. Demetrius, we can see why many countries fear social media. We've seen what happened in Egypt, we've seen what happened in Iran, and certainly Syria has been part of this revolutionary movement using social media.
Yes, let's take Syria. A group of Syrians using Facebook and Twitter began an online campaign calling for anti-government demonstrations in Damascus. Some 2,500 Syrians joined a Facebook page together for a day of rage in Syria. Their goal was to end the emergency in Syria and to end corruption. And interesting enough, another 850 people joined the page as well.
And that wasn't the first time in Syria. And today we have joining us someone who participated in one of the Rising Star protests in Syria, Amir Kidraki. And Amir, you have an interesting history. You escaped from Jordan. And how did you get to Syria and become involved with social media in one of the protests there?
Yes. Actually, the revolution started on March 2011 when some protesters were young children who were getting influenced about what happened in Arab Spring countries and just wrote down on the school walls الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام, which that mean in English, the people want to shut the president down. So actually the government reacts with arresting those children and torturing them so bad. So there is no a place for the fear anymore in the heart of Syrian people. And they are going out to the street shouting for the freedom with a peaceful protests.
Do you think this is just the beginning, the use of social media as from your perspective in the Middle East, or should we expect more of this?
Actually, we can't imagine that something like that's gonna happen before an Arab Spring, and before those children getting influenced by the social media, because it's so hard for the people of Syria to speak out loudly or to shout for freedom in the streets. So as I told you, what happened is there is no place for the fear anymore after the government reacts by arresting the children and torturing them. So that's it.
Will you be going back to Jordan, or will you be going back to Syria once you finish your education? Or?
Yes, actually I graduate, I got my bachelor degree in 2011 once the revolution starts, and after that I forced to escape to Jordan because I forced actually to join the military to stop the revolution and to be the part of the government against my people, against my friends, and which something I can't accept it. So I forced to escape to Jordan, and I continue my studying there. I got my master's degree, and that's it.
Amir, thank you for being with us today, and welcome to Cal State Fullerton, and I'm sure we'll be meeting again soon. And our final story today, dealing with social media, is from Singapore. Why don't you tell us about that story?
Yeah, sure. Back in March 23rd, when the first president of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, he died of an old age. He was 91 years old. Everyone in Singapore was praising how his legacy, because he was the first president and he made Singapore a very successful country. But this kid, his name is Amos Yee. He's a 16-year-old Singaporean. He made a YouTube video criticizing the first president. In his video, which, if I'm not mistaken, was taken down in YouTube, he said, and I quote, Lee Kuan Yew is a power-hungry and malicious, but deceive others into thinking they are both compassionate and kind. He was making a comparison between Lee Kuan Yew and Jesus. Their impact and legacy will ultimately not last as more and more people find out that they are full of bull.
Well, I'm sure the apostles of Jesus will be using social media today, as the Pope has alluded to many times. Thank you, panel, for being here today. It doesn't look good for the press in most of these countries. Some 21 journalists were killed last year while reporting the news. That is on top of the recent beheadings of journalists, including an American. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Anthony Fellow for World Press.